Hey, my name's Jack. I am a 36-year-old Caucasian male. I don't really know what else to say about myself. I'm going to take my talk today is called What If? It's about asking open-ended questions with kids. And it looked like maybe about half the people here have kids. I know there are some people here that are teachers or have had some direct professional experience with kids, but I think there's a lot in childhood that we can learn from as creative people. And it was really exciting to be invited to speak to you guys because it's an honor to get to talk to really creative people. And I'm hoping that we get to share some ideas about ways to build creativity, not just in childhood, and maybe some of these things will be translatable to what you do. So I want to talk about sort of three things. I was encouraged to make this a personal speech or a personal talk. So I want to talk a little bit about what led me to working with kids, and then transition to what I've learned about creativity with kids in my various pursuits with childhood, and then maybe think about some ways that we all together can become more childlike. And I think that's a good distinction, the idea that being childlike is different than being childish. I think sometimes kids are spoken about, youth is spoken about somewhat pejoratively, like that kids aren't all that they haven't grown into themselves yet. And the more that I've learned with kids and the more that I've kind of given them the keys to their creativity, the more I've been so just super overwhelmed by how creative and precocious kids are. And that's across the board. So ways that we can sort of apply some of the creativity in childhood to what we all do, I think that's sort of interesting. So a little bit about me. I taught for 13 years at a school in Seattle called University Child Development School. It's a pre-K through 5th grade, about 300 kids. It's independent, which is actually great for me because I never got a teacher certification. I was a creative writing major at the U. My primary qualification for getting a teaching job was I lived across the street from the school, and they were looking for after-school teachers when I was still an undergrad. It's a really cool place that encourages people who are creative in their own right and in their own ways to teach kids from their unique perspective. There are certified teachers there to make sure that what we're doing is actually founded in developmental findings. That's good, because otherwise, if it had been me, we just would have watched Ghostbusters over and over again, probably. So I learned a lot about child development as part of that process, but I was always encouraged to bring my own creativity to the game. This is a picture of some kids that I taught. This is a 1st and 2nd grade group. They're doing something called Writer's Workshop, and I'll actually share a work sample from that in a few minutes. But they're clustered around a coffee table. It looks like a pretty non-traditional school environment. What's going on here is these kids have been given the challenge to create and to teach themselves about writing and language as they're creating something that they personally care about. Which I think is huge. The notion that kids aren't going to school to be taught facts or things. They're being encouraged, hopefully, to learn how to teach themselves. Because they're so excited about what they're doing that learning how to spell a particular word or how to conjugate a certain sentence is a tool that they need to express themselves creatively. What a huge paradigm shift from what's happening in education across the country. I don't know, do you guys know about Common Core standards? That's some really boring reading if you were looking for good bedtime reading. The notion that there are just thousands of facts that kids need to learn, and once they learn them, they'll be ready for life. How completely incongruous with how life really is. You can leave 12 years of that and still have no idea who you are or what you want to do. So this is a really great place where kids are thriving, learning how to become themselves. This is my band Recess Monkey, and thanks for that introduction, David. That was nice. We are a trio. We're all teachers. We met at that school, actually, and it's now my full-time gig. I stopped teaching 2 years ago when we had our son, and started doing band management. This is us at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. We tour across the country making music for kids, and the whole idea of our bands, I'll never forget the moment when our lead singer, who's wearing the kind of pinkish shirt there. When he suggested to our band, which was doing indie music, non-aspirational, kind of toughing it out, not really wanting to guilt trip our friends to coming out on Tuesday nights. Is anyone here in a band? Is anyone here in a band? Have you alienated yourself from your friends yet? Okay, so I did. It's the worst. Hey, we're playing the Crocodile on Tuesday night at 11 o'clock. You should come out. There's no better way to get your friends to stop answering your emails or reading them than that. Our lead singer noticed the disconnect between what we were doing as jobs and what we were doing as a hobby. We were playing until 2 in the morning at clubs around Seattle and then turning it around and teaching kindergarten at 7 the next morning. That's not sustainable. We wrote a record called The 7 Stages of Grief. That's not super applicable to what most 5-year-olds are dealing with. So this was a great, we just experimented with what would happen if we wrote a record of songs based on the things that we're hearing around school, the things that kids like to do. And I was really hesitant to do it because my vision of what it meant to be a children's performer was to be a person with an acoustic guitar singing songs about ponies and rainbows. That's what I grew up knowing children's music to be. I didn't listen to children's music growing up. So I was really hesitant. And then we were recording a song and using all the recording trickery that we could, putting in reverse drums and echo chamber effects, drinking beer. And I thought, oh, this is making kids music? Sold, let's do that. So 8 or 9 years later, it's what I do for a job. I also host a radio show on SiriusXM. Channel 78. It's a live call-in show 3 hours a day that I get to do from my house, telecommuting to the studios in Washington, D.C. My show is called Live from the Monkey House, a definite tie-in with my band name. What I do is I pick a theme for each day. Kids call in, and they respond to the theme. A couple days ago, we did something called the Invention Convention, asking kids to solve everyday problems using imaginary inventions. So kids called in. One kid suggested the huggable picture frame for when you're feeling homesick at school and you miss your parents. This way you won't get paper cuts from hugging just their photo. You need a soft plush. This is a kid, 5-year-old kid. I got this job as a function of my bands. We were being played on the channel. They had an opening. And with my background with kids, they thought I'd be a good fit. So I've been doing it for about a year now. And it's like the dream job. It's ridiculously exciting to do. And I get to do it in my PJs. And my last qualification for speaking today is that I have a son. This is Oscar. We did a show at Teatro Zinzani where I wore a fake mustache, so he immediately sought out a fake mustache and dressed up like some of the people who were dressed up in the show. We call him Oski Boy. He's a total ham, and he thinks he's a drummer. Well, he is a drummer. He drums perpetually 10 hours a day with drum sets that he cobbles together from things around the house. So who knows? He might join the band soon. But my primary qualification for being here today is that Chris Ballou was busy. I don't know if you guys know Chris Ballou from The Presidents. He has another kids band called Casper Baby Pants. And this is actually a really rich time in Seattle. There's a kindy movement, kids independent music, or kindergarten rock. Kindy, right? It's actually sweeping the country, and there are people that have made their careers doing this. There are several bands here, the Board of Education, the Not-Its, all these bands that play different genres of music but are tying in to kid themes in ways similar to what we do as a band. So that is what I do. So I just have a quick question. Your name tag this morning asked the question what you wanted to be when you grew up. Would anyone like to share their answer? And there's a prize, a free Recess Monkey CD if you'd like to do it. Anyone? Don't be shy. Yeah, what did you want to be when you grew up? Are you a comedian now? That was pretty funny. Why did you want to be a comedian?
I got a Steve Martin record from my mom when I was like way too young because she thought it was like really innocent, but it was really kind of dirty.
Sure, yeah.
So she took it away from me, so I always wanted to play it.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so withholding made you want what you couldn't have. Yeah, he had jokes about smoking weed and stuff. Yeah, that's awesome. What's your name?
Wade.
Let's hear it for Wade. That's brave. That takes bravery. Sorry, let me grab your fabulous prize before I forget. This is our CD deep sea diver, and there are more of these. This is just my wife wants me to clear out the basement. That's why I brought it. So I always had a really hard time answering this question, what I wanted to be when I grew up. The closest I ever got was that. That's, and not because I mean, he is hot. That wasn't it. That, for me growing up, this was the career path. I was shown lots of different sort of archetypal jobs that I could have. I looked at a lot of them. None of them really resonated with me, but being a doctor seemed like it'd be pretty cool. And it would take a lot of work, and I wanted to feel smart as a kid, and really liked the idea of a big challenge like being a doctor. So this is what I thought I wanted to do. When I started at University of Washington, I did the pre-med interest group, thinking this would be my thing, and within like 3 weeks realized I have no idea what I want to do with my life. What's funny is in high school, there was, maybe when we were juniors or seniors, I remember there was a day where you got to go to a different classroom and a professional from different fields would come to that room and talk to kids about sort of what they do. So I went to the medical room along with other people who wanted to talk to a doctor and become doctors later. And there was another kid there, or a guy that I'd grown up with named Tommy Kang, who I just saw in Alaska Airlines magazine. That's him on the left. I mean, you wouldn't know from this picture that he is an oral surgeon, but I guess he's known as being like one of the best oral surgeons in the region. It looks here like he's either selling a cigar or like a mail order husband service or something. Yeah, so I mean, interesting. I just saw this last month, and I thought it was so crazy that, I mean, and I knew that he'd done this, but just to put it in perspective, he was in that room with me. I remember him asking a question about oral surgery, and now, 20 years later, he is an oral surgeon. That's mind-blowing to me. I never knew what I wanted to be. I still don't really know what I want to be. I just listed off a litany of things that I've done. They all seem to center around childhood, but I swear it's by accident. I have had no master plan in my life. I don't know if people here have that experience of you've always known what it's going to be. You've always looked at your life with some sort of a vector. I know people who have. He definitely did. I'm not like that. And I guess maybe one takeaway from this experience is I think from the outside I probably look like I've got my act together. I have no effing idea what I'm doing, ever. So interesting. I think that's interesting to put in perspective. I'm just going to do a little bit more backstory, and I swear this is going to come around. This isn't as self-serving as it seems. I got my start working with kids. I worked at a summer camp in California called Camp Hess Kramer. When I started college, I spent some time at Hillel, the Jewish group at the U. They kind of roped me in, and it seemed like fun, so I did experiences there. And their youth director asked me one day, he took me out to breakfast, and he said, "Do you like beautiful women?" That was like the lead line. And I said, "Well, yeah, I mean, sure, who doesn't?" And he said, "Have you ever thought about living in Malibu, California, where the shores are covered in beautiful women?" This was his lead line. And I didn't really know where he was going. I actually did decide to take him up on the offer of working at the summer camp where he'd been. It wasn't because of beautiful women. I didn't have a great relationship with my dad growing up, and I frankly wanted to learn how to be a dad. I mean, really. I mean, that was probably the biggest thing that I've ever, from a goal perspective, had. That if I ever have kids, I want to be able to speak to kids and connect with kids in a way that I didn't connect with my dad. So for years, I spent 4 years there. During that time, I wrote a book at school. I was a creative writing major. I joined an indie band, and this is the kind of indie band that was playing on Tuesday nights, the kind where we tried to make it as creative as we could. We created, these are glow-in-the-dark suits that we wore at one show. Another one we wore like 1970s tuxes. We really tried to make each show its own unique thing. And every time we went to gigs, the sound engineers would be like, "Oh yeah, you're that band that's always smiling," as if this was sort of like a distinction from most other bands. So that's interesting. Clearly, making music in the indie scenario wasn't for us, and it didn't take long before we tried working with kids. When I was at the U, I started doing graphic design too, sort of freelance work, and I was asked to create a logo for me, for what I did, so that I could hopefully build a business. This was at Hillel. The director there wanted to, I guess, help me by saying, "So, you know, what are you going to call your company?" So I made this logo. This is a photo of the logo. My last name's Forman, so I thought, oh, clever, Forman. I wonder what the 4 things about me are. If I were to try to delineate what I do, what are my 4 things? So I created these 4 little stick figures. I was a writing major, so that seemed good. I was doing design, so that seemed like a good thing. I had a background in music. And I'd been working with kids. So those were the 4 things that I did. And that became my logo. And that was like the big first question that anyone ever asked me that I was able to answer so succinctly. The question was, who are you? And that's a really open-ended question. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, open-ended questions with kids. An open-ended question, as I would describe it, is the difference between one that has a very succinct, concrete answer and one that is interpretable in many different ways. So for instance, in teaching, if you were going to teach math to kids, you could just put out a worksheet, which is a closed-ended question. What's 5 plus 5? There's one answer. There are many others that are all wrong. There's only one that's correct. You could also just give kids 2 5s. You could give them blocks that look, in piles of 5. And you could say, what can we do with these numbers? The difference there is that they'll eventually put them together and make 5 plus 5 equals 10. But implicit in that question is the notion that there are probably lots of other things that you could do. Why stop at adding 5 plus 5 when you could divide them, you could multiply them, you could build towers with them, you could give each one a name and act out imaginary scenes with them. There are so many things you could do with these numbers in a way that kids own. So that's the premise of an open-ended question. If you keep the question open and let kids feel like they're allowed to answer this however they want, suddenly there's an ownership component that encourages them to do their best thinking and follow their interest. Another idea of an open-ended question. This happens at home all the time with our 3-year-old son who goes to a preschool every day. We could ask him, was school fun today? There are 2 potential answers there. Most likely it'll be, yeah, that'll be his answer. Simply asking the question, what was fun at school today? Again, that kind of puts it back on our son Oscar to go a little bit deeper and own the answer in a way that implicitly leads him to believe that we care what he says, rather than this is just something in passing, we're constricting your thinking into this one little answer. We really want to hear about it. We want to hear everything that's going on in your mind about how school was today, including the experiences you had. There's this really great researcher named Ellen Winter from Boston College who talks about the development of art in kids. Specifically, what happens to these amazing imaginary creations in art. And any of you that have young kids, maybe between 3 and 6, you probably see this. The drawings are fanciful, they're weird, they're not super representational, they're super creative. And they're not really grounded in representationalism the way that we're all bludgeoned to do later. So this teacher, Ellen Winter from Boston, is able to show this progression that happens by the time kids are in 4th grade. When they're about 10, they're drawing with this hyper-realism that is completely devoid of any nuance. Why is that happening? And her perspective is it's happening because this is what we're training them to do. We're training kids to think that there are really hard and fast rules. And we do that in every way. The time that you have to be in your seat, where your seat is in the classroom, these closed-ended questions of what's right and what's wrong, and even giving them rubrics like this, how to draw a horse. Which horse would you rather see on your refrigerator at home? That horse, I want that framed. It's amazing. This horse, while sure, that does look way more like a real horse to me. You could have 6,000 kids all follow this and all draw something that looks sort of like a bad version of that with no nuance or ownership. And then they hand that to you and ask you, did I do it? Is that an A? Did I get the grade? That's not bad for them. That's bad for the teacher who did that. Why would you constrict your kids that way? Pablo Picasso, so here's Ellen Winter, sorry, if you're interested in reading her work, Gifted Children and Studio Thinking. She studies the progression of kids into prodigiousness, these kids that have this irrational drive to keep doing something over and over and over again that's self-driven. And then she looks at the development of art and other expressions in kids. So Pablo Picasso said that all children are artists. The problem is how to remain an artist once he grows up. And I think that is so connected to the reality of how kids really make art and grow. The notion that young kids, they haven't been ruined yet. They're still able to express themselves. Maybe they're technically limited in how they can use their hands, but they own the work that they're making. And that's Picasso, who also said it takes a long time to become young. The notion that it takes a lot of time to unlearn that stuff that sort of impeded your creativity as you went. Just one more thing. When we do Writer's Workshop at the school where I used to teach, Writer's Workshop is the only writing program in the elementary levels, or one of the only writing programs. What's on the left, the closed-ended question on the left is, I just found this on the web, but you can sort of interpret what questions led to this, this sheet that this kid's created. It's a presentation copy, clearly best Danielian print. Look at that colorful drawing. This was something meant to be hung for this kid to be really proud of. And clearly, to me, they were answering prompts. On line 1, tell us what you like. And this kid apparently likes go-go's. I'm not sure if that means they like go-go dancers or what that, maybe that's how they spell goggles. I don't know what that is. Tell us how old you are. Tell us your name. Tell us the animal you like, whatever. This was a kid writing into prompts. On the right, I asked my wife, who's still teaching at the school where I teach, to snap a photograph of a Writer's Workshop page. This is just a regular random kid. This is nothing, there's nothing super remarkable about this, other than this kid is writing a story that they totally own. You can see that's teachers writing underneath. As the kid writes, they come to a teacher with the completed page and say, hey, so help me edit this. And the teacher goes through and says, oh, well, this is how to spell leave, and you might want to capitalize Canada, et cetera. And just to make it a little bit more legible, here's what the kid wrote. I leave Canada in my private jet for Hollywood. I finally get to California. I meet Popular Jack. I think that's such a great name for a character. Not me. I don't know this kid, actually. At the airport. He says, well, well, Mateo, would you care for my butler to carry your deluxe briefcase computer for you? Surely not, I yell. And just going back, like you can see, this kid Mateo has embellished the word not. I mean, he's really working hard to capture the intonation and inflection of what language really sounds like. So these kids are the same age. They're both first graders. Which one would you rather read as a teacher? And which one as a kid would you rather have created? I mean, there's no question. That looks maybe a little better from a very prescriptive construct. This is real creativity. This kid owns it. This kid, and the only question that you had to ask this kid was, what do you want your story to be about? The idea that an open-ended question is permission. You're handing a kid the keys and saying, this gets to be yours, whatever you want it to be. And as a teacher, suddenly you're not teaching down to a kid. You're not telling them these 3,000 facts they need to learn in grade 1. You're instead there sitting side by side with them as a coach. So you want to write a story about Popular Jack? Here's how to spell popular, when it comes up. It's totally self-driven. I think that's a really great distinction, and I don't want to soapbox too much about education in America right now, but I do think that this is the kind of model that's going to lead to a generation of thinkers that really have learned something and know how to teach themselves. If we're training kids to be consumers of information, what happens when the company that's creating the information no longer is creating that information for them? And honestly, that's what happened to me. The reason that I wanted George Clooney to be my future is that I grew up in a very closed-ended teaching environment as a kid, and that was one of the products that was given to me, the idea that I could be a doctor. You'll have a show about you. It's pretty fun. So one more quick open-ended question. This is our son. His birthday's coming up. My wife and I have been excited, sort of. I mean, we love him and we love all of his friends, but the notion of throwing like the 3-year-old birthday party is not super exciting. Another kid did it at this place called Culture on North Lake Union, which was fun. So we asked him, like, so do you want to do it where Sienna had her birthday party? And he said, yeah. That one single syllable answer, that's definitely a closed-ended question. We weren't very excited, so a couple nights ago at dinner, we were just thinking, man, this sucks. This is going to be a lame party. This is going to be, like, we can't get the date we want. It's going to be a drag. So we just asked him, Oscar, what do you want to do for your birthday? And he thought for a second, and he's super into trolls right now. He loves the Fremont troll. So his idea of what to do with his friends, he wants to invite all his friends from school. His idea is that he wanted to check out the Fremont troll. And at first, my wife and I were like, oh, that's crazy. We don't live close enough. But then the more we thought about it, like, well, yeah, that's actually a super cool idea. So I called First Student yesterday. We chartered a bus. It's cheap. It's like $150 to get a school bus to take you to a field trip. So we're going to have 20 kids and their parents show up at our house in a couple weeks and get on a school bus, and we're just going to take it to the Fremont Troll and hang out. That's our party. And then get back in the bus and come back. Again, this is the result of an open-ended question. You know, we asked our son this question, and he was able to take it and run with it. And what a breath of fresh air. This party might totally suck, but at least it's going to be, people will be talking about it. It's different, you know, it's different than the regular birthday party. Okay, now lastly, I brought a couple of audio examples of what it sounds like when a kid gets on a riff, when they're really excited about a creative idea. So like I said, I host this radio show live from the Monkey House. It's on Sirius XM. I get callers from around the country. I have a screener in DC. Her name's Gabby. So she answers the phones when I ask kids to call in. She uses a little Google chat box to tell me where the kid's from, maybe how old they are, and maybe just a couple of words to help me understand them. Sometimes kids are hard to hear on the phone. So we played a game yesterday called Questions and Answers. This was because of this morning. I wanted to do something that sort of showed what open-ended questions, what function they have in the real world. So I hope that this works. The first caller was a kid named DJ. So the game is called Questions and Answers. Here's the first half, which is asking the question.
It's time to play Questions and Answers!
Oh, thank you very much. Welcome back, everybody. It's me, Jack, live from the Monkey House. We are ready for a new question, and joining us all the way from New Jersey. Audience, give it up for our newest questioner. It's DJ!
Hello, Jack.
Hello, DJ. Long time no talk. How you doing?
Good.
Good. Well, Happy New Year to you. Are you ready to ask your question?
Yes.
Okay, take it away, DJ.
How do the reindeer fly?
Oh, very
How
top.
do Santa's reindeer fly, actually?
Good. Oh, yeah, that's a good distinction because not all reindeer fly. Just Santa's reindeer. And that's a very topical question, DJ, because, of course, Christmas just happened, and those reindeer just did their duty. Okay, so DJ asked the question, how do reindeer fly? And the whole premise of this show is that kids get to ask these big questions, and then in the next segment, another kid calls in and answers the question however they want. They can do it really linearly. You know, a kid could have called in and said they can't. It's all made up. But thankfully, they didn't do that. And I'm not implying that that's the case, by the way. Santa's totally real, especially on Kids Place Live. Here's the next caller who answered the question. Oops.
It's time to play Questions and Answers!
Oh, thank you very much. Welcome back, everybody. It's me, Jack, live from the Monkey House, and we are playing Questions and Answers. We are on to step 2 of this 2-step game. Step 1, ask a big question. Step 2, answer it. Luckily, we've got another answerer on the phone right now, all the way from California. Audience, a big Monkey House welcome, if you will, for Nick! Hey, Nick, how you doing?
Good, how about you?
I'm well. Thanks for asking, man. How does Santa get his reindeer to fly? What's the story?
So Santa makes them eat magical onions that have like some kind of powder on them to make them fly. But then they smell after.
Yeah, oh, that explains why they smell so much. I mean, first of all, you know what body odor's like when you're a reindeer that's flying to 6 billion houses. You know you're gonna stink at the end of that. No matter what antiperspirant you're wearing, you're gonna smell bad. But you eat onions on top of that, you're gonna reek. Seriously.
And the way I got this, there's kind of an inside joke between me and my brother. So my grandma's husband, so my step-grandpa, he like, if we go to the Outback and eat an onion, and eat the bloomin' onion, he'll put onions on top of that.
Wait, he puts onions?
He puts onions on top of anything.
He'll put onions on top of a bloomin' onion?
Yes.
Man, that's a lot of onion. And then and does he fly home afterward? You guys take the car and he just meets you back at home?
Yeah, he flies home in a super old, beaten-up Cadillac.
By the way, I just love saying bloomin' onion. It seems like you're swearing, but you can totally get away with it. Like, whose bloomin' onion is this? So that was just yesterday, and the show just went like that the whole time. Again, this isn't rocket science, and this isn't school. That's a different situation with real-world ramifications. I wish that as a teacher I could have talked about bloomin' onions for 6 hours a day. You obviously do have to eventually teach something. But that's why this is such a dream job. What drew me to working with kids was just feeding off their creativity. As a band, that's what we do. We write songs not about ponies and unicorns and things like that. We write songs about stuff that we remember from being kids and maybe stuff that we hear kids talking about. Just here's a quick song that we're working on right now. It's a song called The Great Diorama, or Diorama. So we just got back from San Francisco recording this record with John Vanderslice. Do you guys know who he is? Indie singer-songwriter in San Francisco. So.
Each spring the shoeboxes line the hall with pride, with moments of history depicted inside. Third grade they are handmade and displayed. It's the year of the great diorama.
So that's what I do. I've been able to find a life that is peppered with kid inspiration constantly. I'm constantly surrounded by kids. And I've been able to learn how to take things that for me were pretty abstract interests. I didn't know what I'd do with them. I was terrified that I'd have to get a real job, but was able to figure out a way to turn all these things into what I do. The big question that I was asked was, who are you? A big, open-ended question that I was really scared to answer at first. I didn't have an answer to it, but interestingly, now 13 or 14 years after I was asked it, I have an answer to each one of those things, and I actually can put a logo on them. I work doing all these things now. So I think for me, this is the self-serving part that I think ties into the theme. I'm someone that grew up in a very closed-ended educational environment, and because a really great teacher asked me a big open-ended question that sparked my imagination and creativity, 13 or 14 years later, I actually have made my life about being creative. And I think that's a great testament to what we can all do with kids, and just that natural creativity that's built into what they do. So that's my spiel, and I really appreciate you listening. Thank you so much, everybody. So I think, were you going to ask that next question, David, or should I?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do it?
Okay, cool. Sorry. Well, so I have two questions, actually. So one is, and this is like the idea of how to become childlike, and maybe how this has a tool or a ramification for how you can become more creative. I'm just curious what everyone here does to become unstuck. For me, I've found that these kind of open-ended questions are actually really powerful when I'm sort of head-desking a creative problem that I'm working on. And the other question was, at what age did you feel like you were most creative? When you were a kid, not now. Now may be the time, but I'm just, it's sort of interesting. Back when you were growing up, if you think back to those first 18 years, what was the moment where you were most in your creative flow? And that question, both of these questions are not intended to answer in the large forum. I think they're intended to ask each other. This is the break down the barriers with that person that maybe you don't know sitting next to you, and engage them in that conversation. So, am I free to do that? Without any further ado, please turn to the person next to you and tell them the answer to one of those two questions. Either what do you do to become unstuck, or at what age did you feel like you were the most creative, and why do you think so? And we'll be back in a couple minutes, I think, to talk a little bit more. Thanks, you guys.
All right, you guys. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask Jack?
This is the Q&A. Hey! What do I do to become unstuck? I take a shower. That's my place. That's my go-to place. I was writing, I don't know if this made it to you guys, but you can actually trace, water bills like happen every 2 months. You know when our band is at its most creative based on our family's water bills. So we're working on a new record right now. It's about kind of technology and gadgets and inventions and things like that. And I'm regularly now taking like a 45-minute shower during the days. Just thinking, I don't know. Yeah. How about you? What do you do to become unstuck?
Basically try to get out of whatever environment I'm in. Get a walk away, do something completely different, not think about what I'm stuck on.
Yeah, the back burner is pretty powerful. Cool. Any questions? I don't know. I'm not really an expert in anything, but I'm happy to try. Hey.
You said earlier in the talk that you went into working with kids because you wanted to kind of get over the hurdle of knowing how to interact with them and kind of learn how to be a dad. What was that point where you had the epiphany on how to interact with kids?
Yeah. I take it you guys all heard that, but the question was what was the hurdle? What epiphany did I figure out about how to connect with kids, based on my kind of limited experience with the parent-kid relationship. I guess the backstory for me is that I never got kids. I never understood what it meant to be a kid. And my mom has stories about me growing up in our neighborhood. I would never play with kids that I perceived as younger than me for whatever reason. I'm an only child, maybe that's it. I identified with adults, maybe. I don't know what it was. So for me, it was a very mystical idea, and I didn't have a great model in my dad. We've repaired our relationship since then, but it wasn't I didn't learn a lot there. I think the epiphany that I had about connecting with kids, and the summer camp where I worked was a really great place for this. It was the ability to have unscripted and unstructured conversations with kids where there's truly no power dynamic between adult and kid. How is an adult to really show a kid that you truly honor their ideas, not just that you're sort of placating them or humoring them, that truly you're honestly engaged and interested in what they have to say. And how to convey that in a way. I mean, little things like how to squat down when having a conversation with someone who's half your height to get rid of that power dynamic. How to ask open-ended questions that aren't too leading so that kids really feel like they're bringing something to the conversation. That's a craft I feel like I'm still working on, but that's been huge. And I really try to practice it with our son, too. I mean, and really stop myself sometimes when you got to get out the door. School's starting soon. We're late. Sometimes you want to just fill in the gaps and answer questions, put words essentially in your kid's mouth. I really work hard to not do that. I think that's helped me as a teacher for sure. Yeah. Hey.
Hi. Earlier you brought up the distinction between childlike and childish.
Yeah.
But you didn't really embellish on that. So could you do that now?
Yeah, totally. There's this book called Scientist in the Crib. It was written by some researchers at the U and maybe Stanford or something like that. And the whole premise, and it was kind of revolutionary, I think, in my world, in the teaching craft. It's about truly how pre-wired kids are to learn. And if you look at developmentally what's happening, 2-year-olds have the greatest cortical mass of any age. The amount of words that kids learn, something like kids are in their 2 to 3 year, they're learning a word a day. And a day, that's insanity to me, that 3-year-olds can speak English pretty fluently. That's nuts to me. That's insane. I mean, we've come a long way as a species, I think, that this is even possible. So being childlike to me, I think childish, the picture of kids that exists out there and what we're trying to kind of rally against as a band with the music that we make is the notion that kid songs have to be about sort of consumer culture or songs about just popcorn or things like that. That there's an image out there, I think, that being childish is dumbing things down, making them easily palatable for these lesser than beings that are little kids. They're not ready yet to think about the world the way that we as adults do. I think that's completely insane, especially when you spend a lot of time with kids. You realize that their ideas are in many ways better than ours because they're not sort of ground down by having to get up and drink coffee to be awake. They're not worried about their mortgage. Did you see there was something there was a study that money troubles actually makes you dumber. You're worrying about money, you score 13 points lower on IQ tests, just the concerns that we have as adults. So that's the distinction that I see, that being childlike is all these great things about childhood that open your eyes to how to be creative and how to be in the moment and not feel hamstrung by these sort of societal expectations, I guess. Being childish, I think, is a pejorative expectation of what kids can really pull off. Yeah. Hey.
I'm just curious, what about your relationship with your father that maybe didn't go so well has made you a better father?
That's a heavy question. Thanks. No, I appreciate it. Yeah. His question is, what about my relationship with my dad that didn't go well has made me a better dad? Geez, well, probably ask Oscar in 18 years. We'll see if he's still living at home. Yeah, my relationship with my dad is definitely tricky. And I think what we were just talking about, I forget which question I said this in, but your question about what it was that, the epiphany that I had. I think the best way that I can sum up my relationship with my dad is that when we made models together, like those testers models, I had a model phase. We'd be sitting at a table together. There would be like a B-2 bomber model, all the plastic parts laid out. My dad would build it. And if I ever reached in to do something, he would essentially push my hands away and do it. He would sort of show me how it's supposed to be done. I could take that and sort of stretch it across his whole experience with me. I think he thought, and this is like the more traditional teacher model too, I think he thought that his job as a parent was he was a source of wisdom. It was his job to siphon as much of that into me as he could by telling me sort of everything that has to be. I think a lot of teachers work that way too, and I think they were trained to do that. I think that Common Core standards and all these expectations of teaching to the test and all that, I think people are trained to do that. What I learned sort of as I explored childhood and how I connected with kids was that really that's not important. That you're modeling to kids constantly how you think and how you, and this doesn't matter. You're constantly modeling to kids. They're always watching what you're doing. And most likely, if you're genuinely enthused about something, if there's a smile on your face and you're in this flow moment where you're really happy, I feel like they learn more from that than anything else. And if you're ground down by being frustrated that your kid isn't listening or hasn't learned the wisdom that you have to share, you're doing it wrong. That's where I've gotten. I think it's going to take me probably another 60 years to truly get there. But our kid's pretty happy, so yeah. One more question.
Musically, what do you find makes kids' music different from independent rock music, but your kind of kids' music different from traditional
Yeah.
play piano, dumb,
Raffy,
Yeah.
Barney, yeah.
Where's the line for you guys, or how do you find your?
Yeah, so what distinguishes what we do from true indie rock music, and what distinguishes us from like the run-of-the-mill, like sing about ponies kind of performer?
I mean, it's not just lyrical; it's also arrangement.
Yeah.
But you can't get too Radiohead on the kids, or can you? 'Cause I think
You can actually.
you could.
Yeah.
But then why not just give them Radiohead, right? So
Right.
which you still should do, but.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot in there. There was a really great debate between one of the key Kindie bloggers. I mean, it's a movement when there are bloggers that devote themselves to the movement. It was this guy, Jeff Bogle from Philly, against some guy from the New York Times. And the guy from the New York Times was like, screw kids' music. I grew up on the Beatles and I turned out great. I love music. Why do this? And I guess the answer is the Beatles didn't write songs about getting a Zerbert from your dad. When you like blow raspberries on your kid's stomach. The Beatles wrote a lot of songs about like love, about like true adult, gross, gushy, romantic love, which they're great songs. Radiohead has written a lot of songs about subterranean alienation and all kinds of things. I think there are a lot of models in those songs that are great for kids to be connected to, but from an intellectual perspective, I don't think that kids get what Kid A is about. Really, I mean, just from like a purely thinking perspective, that is a record that's in response. Oh yeah, I don't, good, me either. I'm a bass player, I don't listen to lyrics. I think that record is in response to the kind of grinding down that we all experience as adults. And I think that a lot of music is reflexive to a traditional adult experience. I think there's a lot of reason for kids to connect with that. I think what we do as a band is we connect with, we're trying to create something that the whole family can do together and will resonate on every level, like the great Warner Brothers cartoons, where there's a joke for a kid, there's a joke for an adult, like a sophisticated joke for an adult. And they're experiencing it together. They might not get every reference. Some things might seem a little dumbed down to the adult. Some things might seem a little bit, I don't get that, to the kid. But together they're woven into a gestalt. It's something that connects with everyone. Hopefully the energy's right. Our criterion for our music, about whether the music is working or not, is if the lyrics were gone, would we want to listen to this on our own? If we were, just queuing up Pandora in our car and this song came up, sans lyrics, would we be satisfied with it? Musically, is it interesting? So there's all that. But yeah, I mean, that song about the diorama, that's in a minor key. There's a lot of pretty gritty sounds to it. It doesn't end happily. The second verse of that song is about how invariably parents will always screw up their kid's diorama after the kid goes to sleep. And it's so true. I've seen some amazing parent work delivered in my classroom the morning that the project's due. Those parents are really creative. But that's the truth. I think that's going to resonate with some kids. So that's the distinction. And I guess a friend of mine who I grew up with just sent me his album of kids' songs. And I really wanted to like it. His songs were entirely for kids, though. So it was songs about going up in a hot air balloon. As an adult listener, I didn't feel included in it. And maybe from purely the kids' perspective, these will be good songs that will resonate. I probably wouldn't take my son to see that show because I don't know if I want to listen to those songs live for 45 minutes. As a band, Recess Monkey, we've played about 1,000 shows now, which means that some of our higher rotation tunes in live shows we've played 700 or 800 times live, not to mention recording and mixing and all the repeated listenings. So it's crucial to us that these resonate. And we're all music fans, so yeah. So that's kind of that interesting creative tension that we've tried to create. Hopefully it's working. Cool. I think that's the last question. Thank you guys so much for coming. It's a total honor. I really appreciate it. And I'll be here in case anyone wants to say hi or go to work.